It was built to last 17 years, but the red RM, Routemaster Bus, is driving into its 4th decade.
In today's modern climate, one of the major factors is cost. And this old baby will cost you 1/3 of what one of these new vehicles would.
They are a bus before the time, really. They're very, very built well, and they'll last another 30 years for the Routemaster.
Like many examples of London architecture, it also has its critics.
Well, of course, the Routemaster is probably a member of the oldest working museum in the world now.
Well, the thing is, the Routemaster has a very friendly face. The newer buses are terribly square and not very welcoming. But the Routemaster, you know, it comes along, it looks so friendly, and when you're getting on, there's somebody standing on the platform ready to welcome you. You go through a sort of lobby.
Morning, Adam. Can I take your
Then
top?
you go into the sitting area, and it's all like sort of being at home and very reassuring.
Please hold tight now.
The RM's got a very simple, conventional layout. You've got the engine, 2 shock absorbers which are coiled, front axle, and then it runs through the flywheel, fluid flywheel. Exhaust runs out and around and straight down the end of the bus. Prop shaft, gearbox, another prop shaft, and then we come to the final bit, the transmission, the back axle on the right-hand side, which is a small back axle. You can undo the bolts, drop it down, new one up, finished. Not like the new ones where you've got double reduction drives and Christ knows what, where you've got to pull half the bus apart to get at them. That's about it, really.
This bus is the last built to house an endangered species, the conductor.
You take a seat, sir, please. Go on as far as Oxford Circus. Traffic lights now, man, and be careful. This is traffic lights. Be very, very careful, please. Only Oxford Circus now. Be careful.
We're all going on a summer holiday. No more working for a week or two. Fun and laughter on a...
The Routemaster's predecessors made London's double-decker an institution, a mobile monument as familiar as Tower Bridge and Trafalgar Square, recognised across the world. In their heyday, when private cars were beyond most pockets, buses in London were cheap to ride on and profitable for their owners. The world's biggest urban passenger travel authority, London Transport.
By its easily recognised visual characteristics, London Transport signposts the traveller and speeds him through this giant sprawl. The circle and crossbar on every bus stop and station. The bullseye symbol is there to reassure.
Even a century ago, buses had the same layout of driver high up at the front and 2 floors for passengers linked by a spiral staircase at the back. Before World War I, buses were covering 500 million miles of London streets a year. In the 1920s, free enterprise flourished. Over 400 private operators touted for London passengers. Such unbridled competition was frowned upon, and an Act of Parliament in 1933 created London Transport. Its chief, Lord Ashfield, promised a properly coordinated system of passenger transport, avoiding wasteful and unnecessary competition. In 1933, the city had 40 different types of bus. London Transport wanted a single tailor-made model. After the war, the need for a new bus was all the more pressing. In October 1947, plans were drawn up.
The Routemaster is a remarkable vehicle. Its history goes back many, many years. It's really the ultimate development of the traditional London open platform bus. When the Routemaster was first developed in the 1950s, an amazing amount of time and effort was spent on producing a vehicle which in its day was staggeringly ahead of its time, a very advanced specification which even today compares quite favourably with brand new vehicles.
One of the engineers on the design team was Colin Curtis.
It was decided that we should work on the principle of evolution and not revolution. In other words, we would utilise existing experience from previous models, experience of development work we had done and tested in service, so that we weren't creating a completely new and untried vehicle.
It might have looked like its predecessors, but underneath it was a bus of the future, a schoolboy's dream come true. The world's most up-to-date bus will be the first to have power steering, hydraulic brakes, automatic gears, independent springs and fresh air heating for the passengers. Features unheard of even on most cars of the day.
Since London Transport had been involved in assembling Halifax aircraft during the war, a good deal of experience was drawn from this particular work in that body parts would all be interchangeable on the bus.
It could be put together and taken apart like a Meccano kit. Extensive use of aluminium saved weight. Carrying 64 passengers, 8 more than its predecessor, the Routemaster weighed the same. Materials new to buses, like fiberglass, were used for the bonnet and emergency back door. Every detail was considered. A cubbyhole was made so the conductor could stand out of the way of passengers, and the cockpit was designed around the driver. Douglas Scott had designed everything from toasters to heaters to cookers. He was responsible for the Routemaster's look, though some of his early designs were thought too radical.
I think that any design comes off if attention is paid to every detail of it, but the right attention.
Scott even designed the seat fabric.
You'll notice that the vertical stripe is a double bright yellow. Well, now the idea of that was that when the material was new, the stripes were there and they could be seen as part of the design. As the material wore down, although the colours did fade, the brightness of the exposed cross yellows kept the whole seat looking clean and wholesome to sit on and brightened the interior of the bus.
The Routemaster was designed in-house by London Transport staff with a view to being an attractive piece of street furniture and at the same time serve the public of London.
Building the first Routemaster prototype took 3 years, and there was another 5 years of testing before it went into full production. Nearly 100 people were involved in its development. Their attention to detail was more appropriate to a spaceship than a bus.
When the design has been approved, the bus is tested again. This time for 6 weeks at full speed, 200 miles a day over a special proving ground. Bumps and bends are there in abundance. And if in all conditions the bus behaves itself according to plan, it will at last be judged thoroughly fit for public service in London. The revolutionary design of the Routemaster ensures that it is not only safer and easier to drive than the older buses, but also more comfortable to ride in.
Demanding standards were set for new buses. The tilt test result delighted the designers.
Oh, she passed that with flying colours. There was no problem whatsoever. Went way over the figure, and it pleased us no end.
So in addition to day-to-day care in the garage, after 3.5 to 4 years on the road, every standard bus of the 8,000 in the world's largest unified bus fleet comes into the largest public service vehicle overhaul factory in the world, Aldenham. A greater initial cost, but a more efficient and, in the long run, more economical way of carrying the load into the future.
Convinced that their monopoly would last forever, London Transport had created a vast service centre in anticipation of expanding its fleet.
First, it loses its identity. It's rotated like a toy on this inverter. 3.5 years accumulation of oil-bound road dirt is pressure hosed away. Everything must be progressing continuously towards the reassembly.
The Routemaster was built with Oldham in mind. In the 50s, the labour shortage made attractive working conditions a high priority.
A job to be done and a man to do it. Again, a principle in practice. First, bring him into a suitable space to perform his task. Next, provide him with every possible mobility. Offer him a fair incentive, and you can reasonably expect that everyone, the man, the works, the bus concern, and the public, will get the benefit of a good, fast job.
At the time, our chairman wanted to advertise the bus, and on the prototypes he put, "This is the bus of the future." We thought we could do it quietly. We didn't want to make a big show of the thing because we knew that something would go wrong.
But the biggest problem was for crews, who had to adjust to the modern lightweight design.
Well, it was a bit of a sensation. They only gave us an hour to get used to it. And on our first trip up into Crystal Palace, as we rounded the roundabout into the first stop, I found that the so light on the front wheels that when I applied the brake, it skidded. And it frightened the life out of me, I must admit. It frightened the passengers waiting at the stop as well.
I know when I was first in London and the Routemasters were all new. You know, we all knew that it had been specially designed for London, and it was obviously so good for its work. We used to travel on those lovely long routes right across London, and you could look at, I mean, I always used to try and get the front seat on the top deck on the 73. It was absolutely super. We used to go from Oxford Circus to the Albert Hall for the proms every year, night after night.
It was 1959 before the RM went into full production. Over 2,700 were built during the 1960s. On the streets, they were a hit. Buses were travelling 20 million miles a year. It was a tribute to British craftsmanship. Suppliers were proud of their association with the Routemaster.
Everything's pip-pip and tickety-boo in San Francisco. For it's London Week, don't you know? And a double-decker bus hobnobs with the cable cars. The Union Jack flies.
But back home, the London bus had a competitor, the car. In the 50s, the car population in London had tripled, slowing traffic to speeds little faster than the horse bus era. But planners made the car's needs a priority.
Revolutionary new measures are announced to cope with London's parking problem, and this is one of them, the 2-hour parking meter. It's no good smiling sweetly at a police constable. These things are glamour-proof and quite infallible. And both the time and the charge can be adjusted, not of course by the motorist, according to local circumstances. In fact, the darn things just aren't human.
Despite the publicity, by the mid-60s, London buses were losing £5 million a year. When cuts were made, bus crews made their feelings known in the traditional British way.
Here's a picture of 8,400 buses not being there, and that's quite something. For it's 21 years since London's buses were completely stopped by an official strike. So London walks to work.
New economies meant revolutionary new designs which threatened the RM.